one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed.
Our streets, our streets, our streets, our streets.
I have a dream.
Good evening. I'm Anne Marie Johnson, and welcome to the conclusion of Tears, the event against racism and stereotyping. 63 years ago today, 9 African American teenagers were denied entrance into a segregated high school in Arkansas. Later known as the Little Rock Nine, these brave Americans dared to do the unthinkable. They refused to remain silent. Their bravery shined a bright light on the shameful practice of discrimination, systemic racism, and intolerance. Bringing attention to hatred and intolerance can be achieved in many ways, from marching in the streets to simply refusing to tolerate hate speech from anyone. Tonight, through the use of the spoken word, visuals, and music, you'll hear stories of sadness and pain, but also of hope, joy, and empathy. The Mankind Project welcomes iconic TV star and prolific playwright Ted Lang, young exciting actress Cindy Luna, and supermodel and entrepreneur Beverly Johnson as our first guests on the final episode of Tears, the event against racism and stereotyping.
I apologize for being black, for all I am and all I lack. Please, sir, please, ma'am, give me some slack, because I apologize. I apologize for being poor, for being sick and tired and so. Since I ain't slick, don't know the skull, so I do apologize. I apologize because I bear resemblance. Most black people share thick lips, flat nose, and nappy hair. Yes, I apologize. I apologize for how I look, for all the lows and blows I took. On those, Lord knows, I closed the book as I apologize. I apologize for all I gave, for letting you make me your slave and going to my early grave. Yes, I apologize. I apologize for being caught, for being sold, for being bought while being told I count for naught. Yes, I apologize. I apologize for all I've done, for all my toil out in the sun. Don't want to spoil your righteous fun, so I apologize. I apologize and curse my kind for being fooled, for being blind, for being ruled and in your bind. Yes, I apologize. I apologize and curse my fate for being slow, for being late, because I know it's me you hate. Why not apologize? I apologize and tip my hat, because you so rich, free, and fat. Son of a bitch, that's where it's at, and I apologize.
I feel that the world needs empathy. I feel that the world needs an awakening. I feel that the world needs to listen to one another and understand. Empathy is understanding your situation. Empathy is putting myself in your shoes and trying to get where you're coming from without judging you. We're very quick to judge. We're very quick to say, oh, this person's like this because of that. Or we don't even justify. We right away judge that person And in me putting myself in your shoes, or at least a little bit, and trying to understand, hear your story, maybe grab a bite with you and just like learn, why is it that you are the way you are, or why is it that, or try to understand where you're coming from. The world needs love, but most of all, the world needs, and we need to understand what love is. What really is that love that we all talk about constantly? I love you, but what does that mean?
I was stopped in West Hollywood, I would say about a month ago. And it had to be a few months ago now because we've been inside all this time, losing track of time. And I was at midnight, and I was on my way back to the desert, and I was held 2.5 hours in the alley. I have never been so scared in my life by police officers. They don't see me. I don't know what they see, but it's not me. I think kids, they don't hate. I think that, I think that, children are taught to love or to hate. They're empty vessel. I like to, expose my grandchildren to all the wonderful things that life has to offer.
We will not apologize. Our next guests may come from different walks of life, but award-winning actress and activist Frances Fisher, current Emmy-nominated actress Rain Valdez, multi-Emmy award-winning actor and star of the hit series Greenleaf, Keith David, and legendary manager and musicians advocate Ron Stone all strive for tolerance and compassion.
I think that the historical significance of the racism we're experiencing today in 2020 goes all the way back to the founding of this country. When the European colonizers came here, they committed genocide against the indigenous people whose land this is. And anywhere we walk in this country, we're on native land. The creators of the Declaration of Independence had very lofty ideals. It was the first time that democracy was ever created, yet they were slave owners. So they had a conflict already, and it's still all men are created equal. It wasn't even women, because women didn't have the right to vote. White women got the right to vote, but then it took a while for Black women to get the right to vote. And we're still dealing with the ERA. So there's always been a tumultuous relationship between our ideals and the reality of what's lying beneath the surface. And I think when you were talking about systemic racism, I think that we have to get to the bottom of it, beneath the swamp, so to speak, to root out these unrighteous ways of thinking. Racism, ageism, sexism, ism, it's all connected. The new buzzword is intersectionality, but it's really true, because if you start working on one thing, the environment, then you're going to understand that it affects Black and brown people disproportionately, because they build all these horrible things closer to where poor people live because they don't care. I witnessed it when I went to Standing Rock. We have to educate the population about how important this November 3rd vote is.
I think racism to me is a systemic built issue that oppresses certain people in our society, and particularly the African American community and transgender people. As a transgender woman, yes, I do feel connected to other marginalized groups of people, especially Black trans women. Black people are the most affected when it comes to racism, and Black trans women are the most targeted and violently attacked, especially in our country. So yes, as a woman of color, I do find that it's my responsibility to uplift people who are marginalized as much as I am, but people who are marginalized more than I am. I feel most comfortably in spaces that are very diverse. I surround myself a lot with community, with my LGBTQ community here in Los Angeles. I feel most comfortable at home. And I don't feel very comfortable walking out onto the streets, especially today in 2020. Just last week, 3 women were robbed. Just last week, 3 trans women were robbed and violently attacked just walking down the street on Hollywood Boulevard because someone had clocked that they were trans women. And that's scary for someone like me as a woman of color and as a trans woman because it's literally just down in my neighborhood. So it's scary to think that it's happening in your own home, in your own city. Growing up was tough because I didn't have very many positive examples of what a trans woman could look like, growing up. A lot of it were very negative depictions based on what I saw on film and TV. It wasn't really until I moved out to LA when I started to meet people who were like me. And that's when I started to see that I didn't have to be what these stories were telling in film and TV. I didn't have to be those narratives. I can create my own narrative. I can show the people what trans people are really like. And I think I've started to do that so much more in the last 10 years of my career, which is something that's very, very important to me. Showing the world what we really are like in our own voice, having our own agency to tell our stories. I think it's really important that we start humanizing trans people and women of color and Black trans women in media because there's such a lack of it. If a child came up to me wondering what their future was going to be like as a transgender person, I would assure them that no matter what happens, there are people that are creating a world where things are constantly getting better for them. Now that you've heard my voice, I want to know what you think about racism and intolerance in today's society. So please click the link below and share your story.
Have you had the talk with your children? And I've had it with my son. And it's just necessary. It is. I don't have to like it. I don't like it. But it is, and that's the reality. One of the reasons why I'm here with you today is to do something, contribute in some way to change that reality. You can only change the reality by changing a man's thinking. It's a human thing that when it doesn't affect you personally, you have a tendency to keep it on the periphery. If you just roll over and don't stop to acknowledge that you've just ended a life, there's something wrong with you. And if it doesn't take a toll at that moment, wow, it will take a toll in your life, because we should not walk around with no disregard for life. There is no excuse for witnessing the mistreatment of another human being and not saying something about it, and doing something about it when you can. If you told me, oh man, I've known you so long and I like you so much, I don't even see color, then I think you're stupid. Are you crazy? You must know when I walk through the door, I'm a Black man. I'm going to be a Black man. Now, whether or not that's foremost in your consciousness when you think about me, that's another story. I don't think it should be. My humanity should. My heart should be the first thing that you think of. But If you tell me you forget that I'm black, I think there's something wrong with you. I don't forget that if we're standing on the street in New York, who the cab is going to stop in front of first. That's the reality. I don't have to agree with it. I don't have to like it. It just is. I would say that, 45 is mostly wrong, but he's also mostly inappropriate.
So I managed Ziggy Marley for a period of time in Jamaican music, which is surprisingly spiritual. And it comes, the roots of it prior to Bob Marley, but Bob Marley was, for me, if somebody asked me, who did I ever think, who was the Messiah? I would have chosen Bob Marley, okay? First of all, there was a time when the three most recognizable people on the planet were Muhammad Ali, Michael Jordan, and Bob Marley. They were the three most recognizable people. And what was Bob Marley's message? One love. And right now, that song is having a huge resurgence because it's appropriate for the message that needs to be told now. But the point about who's going to emerge to unite behind the cause of righteousness in this age, it could be a plumber from New Jersey.
Preeminent award-winning jazz artist and composer Kevin Eubanks, beloved actress turned respected director Terry Vaughn, and acclaimed Broadway star Mel Johnson Jr. next will all share their personal observations on systemic racism, intolerance, and ways they cope during these very challenging times.
There's a beautiful thing about music. It brings cultures from all over the world together with common purpose. Thinking about what the NBA is doing is very inspiring. The WNBA as well. They become such a force in many ways. People love to watch it. They get excited by it. It brings emotion when you're watching these players play. It brings people together. People are high-fiving each other. They don't even know each other. Their team is winning, and it all seems like it's entertainment, similar to music. What they're doing, getting that platform to help with the injustices that are going on. I'm so inspired by it. You have to look at it in a deeper sense than it's a sport, as it's an entertainment. It's, that they will come together and say, we have to do something, which means that community of the NBA has decided that together we're going to make an impact, do the best we can, not to just bring recognition to something that people know about is going on, what we can actually do, not just talk about it, not just say we're going to do it. We're going to get together and we want to make some changes. Is the musicians of the 50s and 60s created such an intense love of music in me and other musicians that I've spoke to about this, because they were connected with what was going on in their communities in the 60s. Those 60s. There's a war going on. There's civil rights. There's human rights. We're not just fighting for civil rights. There's human rights. There's a difference. Human rights, you can reach to other countries and say help or understand. If your character is one of compassion, honesty with yourself, should I do this? What kind of character am I? What kind of character is there within me that will allow me to do this? You don't need to be educated to know you shouldn't shoot people in the back 7 times. That's not an educational thing. That's a character thing. I believe that there's going to be so much amazing internal music that is going to come out to externally be expressed through all this pandemic, through the election, through all of these things that are going. There's going to be a wave of not just creativity, but there's going to be something attached to it.
Well, what I tell my kids and what we've been telling our kids in this climate is, first of all, giving them more of a history lesson of who we are as a people. I think that one of the biggest faults of America is in the school system, how we're taught about our history. It seems that African Americans started at slavery, and that is not true. Our history goes back so much, and it's so rich, and there's so many things that are left out of history, which is not beneficial, not just to us as a race of knowing who we are, which empowers us knowing who we are, but it's also a misfortune for any race because this is history. And I've been learning so much and pouring that into my kids, making sure that they learn it from an early age, because that empowers you. Knowing where you come from, knowing the greatness and richness of your people is a part of you. How do we laugh still has been an ongoing, to be honest, an ongoing battle for me, because I like to laugh. And I've made a living off of helping other people to laugh. And I know that laughter is healing. I know that that we're so in need of it. But I mean, if I'm being honest, it's been really hard for me to even tap into that. You know, I think that I just have to be in a moment of being honest and genuine. I can't try to hide it. I can't try to act like I'm okay with anything, because I'm not okay right now. And I feel the weight of being a Black person and seeing Black people being murdered. I feel that weight. No, we just have to be honest with where we are. This is where we are right now. And emotions are raw, admittedly, and understandably. Emotions are raw and sensitive. And that's where I am right now. So please share your thoughts, share your feelings, share your testimony.
I was born and raised in New York City, but my father was born and raised in North Carolina, and my mother was born and raised in New Jersey, Atlantic City, actually. So as a kid growing up in the urban environment, you're not slammed in the face with racism. I was born in the projects, Queensbridge projects, biggest projects in the city, lower income projects. And at the time I was raised, it was fairly integrated, but it quickly became white flight and that was gone. And then wanting to go to school and being a fairly smart kid, you're in a class with a lot of white kids. So the race thing wasn't a huge issue. Jump forward to college where what happens is you're lulled into a situation where you don't think there's really much racism going on. I just did a major TV show last year. I won't say the name of it. I go in for a wardrobe test and I purposely dressed very nicely. I was in slacks. I was in a suede bomber jacket, leather briefcase, went into the office where it was a room full of white millennials, PAs, working. And I said, "Excuse me, can you tell me where wardrobe is?" And a young white woman looked up at me and she said, "Oh, you here for a delivery?" And I said to myself, what in this sphere does it look like I'm a delivery boy? Good-hearted white people don't realize that this is not something that you can patronizingly say, "Oh, I'm sure things are getting better and I just can't believe, this is going on," or saying all the right things, but you don't live it. You can't walk around with a chip on your shoulder.
Our next guests include national radio show host and political analyst Mo Kelly, actor, writer, producer Christopher B. Duncan, and the Emmy Award-winning star of the hit series Greenleaf, Lynn Whitfield.
I don't know how to tell you my story other than just to tell you my story. I remember the first time I was called an N-word by a fifth grader. I was a kindergartner. So I was introduced very early to the power of racism. I remember the stories my parents would tell me of working in the Torrance School District, of how my father was stopped by the police and the police did not believe that he was actually a teacher in the school district and followed him to his school to prove where he worked. I remember when my mother told me of how she was called a pretty negress by one of her coworkers as a teacher working in the Torrance School District. There are all these anecdotal stories of the things that I endured, including having a gun put to my head when I was 13 years old because the Torrance police thought I had robbed Crocker Bank. It was being robbed, just not by me and not by a Black person. So I understand intricately the power of stereotypes, the power of racism. And even though that was back then in the 1980s, I can't say that it's much different today. Yes, we've had a singular Black president. Yes, we've had a vice presidential Black female candidate, but that doesn't mean that for the fullness of African Americans, life has changed or we're perceived as a group differently, or that our humanity collectively is seen. We can talk about police brutality in George Floyd or Stephon Clark or Samuel DuBose, Tamir Rice, Alton Sterling. We can run the list, and the hashtags bother me. Breonna Taylor, so many. John Clark. There has to come a point in time where we remember our humanity. And on this, the anniversary of Dr. King's speech at the March on Washington, let's not forget it was an excoriation of America. And he was saying, without using the words Black Lives Matter, that Black lives do matter. And it's our responsibility to remember that it's more than just legislation. It's about people. It's about hearts. It's about minds. It's about our neighbors. It's our friends. It's our relatives. It impacts all of us, racism and stereotyping. And it's not just enough to want it to end. We have to, as Senator Kamala Harris said, we have to put in the work. We have to want to do it, not only for ourselves, but for our children and for our future.
If you are comfortable with my oppression, then you are my oppressor. That quote is from the late civil rights activist, A. Philip Randolph. And it speaks volumes about the core of the problem with racism to this very day. And that is indifference. The federal government, when it comes to terrorism, they say to us, if you see something, say something. Well, racism is terrorism. So if you see something, say something. Say something with your vote. Say something in the workplace when you hear casual racism spewed about without any consequence. Racism manifests in many different forms. It isn't just in a Klan hood and robe. You can see it in a teacher at school, in a CEO of a corporation, in a man in a suit sitting in the Oval Office, or in a police officer who uses his knee for 8 minutes and 46 seconds on the neck of a Black man named George Floyd. George was handcuffed while this was happening, and he pleaded for that officer to let him breathe. What would you feel if he had been one of your loved ones? Elie Wiesel said, we must take sides. Neutrality only helps the oppressor, never the victim. To the millions of white people who reject Trump's ideology of white supremacy, I say to you, I see you, I appreciate you, and we are definitely on the same side.
When I experienced overt racism, as a child, it hurt my feelings. as a young adolescent growing up, I would meet fire with fire, even though I was sometimes afraid, because I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and went to Robert E. Lee High School. So there were huge resistances to Black kids being in the school. So I would meet it with fire, and then I would meet it with accomplishment. Now, as an adult in the environment that we're in now, when I am faced with overt racism, I right now am afraid. I'm very nervous about the lack of consciousness in people at this time, and how we have just, how divided we are. So how I meet it now is to make sure that I work with a platform that is working against racism, and I will make sure that on November 3rd, I am voting. I remember the first time that I talked to my daughter about racism. It was really funny. I raised my daughter in New York City, which is an absolute melting pot, and is everything. It fulfills all of America's promises that way, that you see all kinds of human beings from all walks of life and all cultures just walking from 56th Street to 96th. So I raised her in New York. I had to teach her that sometimes the messages of racism are very subtle, but they make a big difference in your consciousness. What I think we can do is just let someone walk in our shoes, sort of walk them through what it must have felt like to be Emmett Till's mother. What would have a mother say, I want them to see. I want the world to see what this kind of hatred did to my son.
I'm honored to introduce our last guest tonight. Celebrated award-winning and Emmy award-winning actor, Mr. Louis Gossett Jr., and one of the most powerful women in America, and a tireless advocate for fairness, inclusion, and tolerance, Congresswoman Maxine Waters.
Doing something for the benefit of the whole still seems to be more important today than it used to be before. It's the only answer we have left for our mutual salvation. My great-grandmama, and I'll show you a picture of her before we leave, she used to have a thing called railroad mill snuff in her mouth. She used to be a slave, and she used to talk like this. And most rocking feel like this. So when I got famous in 1954, being the one with the money and the Broadway, she tapped me on the shoulder and said, let me tell you something. God was here before you got here. You're going to be here while you're here. You're going to be here a long time after you've gone. So I want you to calm on down and let him run things. So whenever I thought, when she said that, and I believed it, everything was good. And when I didn't believe it, everything was bad. That's the communication, one more time, from the elder down to the next generation. So what I'm doing today, the reasons why you called me and others like me, is what I'm thinking about is for the benefit of the whole tribe. If we do something for the benefit of all of mankind, a magic takes over. So there's no accident that we are together trying to figure this out. It's simpler than we make it. It's a simple return to nature. And if we return to nature as a people, racism, as we know it, must disappear. We have to realize it's going to take mankind in order to save mankind. Not us first, not you second. All that mankind invitation's got to go out of the way. We've got to look at each other honestly and ourselves and do the things that started back in the beginning of time when man was the most intelligent species on the planet. His responsibility is to take care of this planet, the clarity of the oceans, the cleanness of the air, the pureness of the food, and it translates into the pureness of our relationships with ourselves, our family, and there's no such thing as enemies. There's no such thing as impossible. The forefathers, the George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, I don't know where they got it because they had slaves, but what they wrote was magic. We hold these truths to be self-evident, and that we are endowed with certain inalienable rights. And among those rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Wow, where did they get that? Because they had slaves, they were warriors. Something magic took their brain and put it in their hands, and they wrote these magic words. We have not lived up to it yet. It's going to take mankind to save mankind. Now that you've heard my voice, and I'm going to say it again and again, if you're interested, I want to hear your voice. We need to put these voices together for the benefit of all of us. If you're interested in doing that, click on the link below and let me hear you. In the meantime, enjoy your life. It's important.
At this time in the history of this country, in my own career, I'm feeling absolutely concerned about confrontation, about racism, and about an administration at the highest level of government that's initiating conflict, and an administration that's dog whistling to white supremacists and to the KKK and others who are now finding themselves with a friend in the White House and who's willing to back them up in all kind of ways. Some are subtle, some not so subtle. And so this is a very difficult time. The Justice Department is owned by the President of the United States of America. In that Justice Department, you've got the FBI, you've got intelligence, you've got everything that you need in order to deal with the issues that are causing us so much concern in this country. And then when you add to it that this president has been very successful in stacking the courts. And so even though there have been maybe one or two decent decisions out of the Supreme Court, with Kavanaugh there, the Supreme Court is not something we can rely on. We must be cognizant of what we're doing and our role as parents and people who are guiding them and who are building character. You know, that's extraordinarily important. When I look at the President of the United States, I see that he is a flawed character. And I keep wondering what happened to him in his growth, in his socialization, in his development. And so it's very important for us to demonstrate empathy and honesty and caring as parents and as people who are guiding young folks. I think that this is a wonderful opportunity because even for a lot of young people who have not believed very much in politics, and sometimes they say, oh, you know, all the politicians are the same. They see the difference with this president. They never had the kind of experience that would help them to understand the difference. But the way that he's conducted himself, the way that he's defined himself, the words that he's used, the way that he has talked about people, now they know that there is a difference. And so I think all we have to do is make sure that they have the information. They've got to understand about mail-in voting, absentee voting, and when they get the absentee vote from ballot from the Secretary of State, they've got to fill it out and send it in. If you belong to a church, if you belong to a group, talk about it so that everybody will understand, you know, what to do, how important it is, and help each other in making sure that either we're filling out the forms or we're getting people to the polls. So just keep doing what you're doing. Please click on the link below. You've heard from me. Now it's time to hear from you. Thank you.
What an incredible experience this has been. On behalf of the Mankind Project, I'd like to thank all who gave their time, energy, and talent to make tears a reality. And a special thank you to the Mankind Project founder and president, Richard Steller, and his endless love for the better angels in all of us. Tonight, we've asked you to share your thoughts and stand with us against racism and intolerance. Well, now is the perfect time to do that. Simply click on the link below and share your thoughts in a selfie video, and then post to the Mankind Project site DREAM, the database of racial empathy advancing mankind. This upcoming national election will be, without question, the most crucial election this country has faced in generations. As soon as you get your ballot, fill it out, sign it, and mail it. If you live in a state that requires you to request an absentee ballot, do it now. Let's make sure all of our votes are counted. I'm Anne Marie Johnson, and on behalf of the Mankind Project, thank you for watching. And remember, wear a mask, wash your hands, practice social distancing. Stay safe. Good night.